completely, it's a really refreshing story for me, because when I went down to Shreveport, I had these preconceptions of who the evangelicals were, the mega church Christians, and just by meeting his friends and by reading his book, I realized this guy was the real deal. He wasn't some proselytizing, intolerant Christian. He was the kind of guy when a homeless man moved into his trailer on his property, he came out there with clothes and food and conversation and helped this guy find a job. And this is a guy who started 100 different companies. Some of them, not any of them were really wildly successful, but he was so creative and independent and entrepreneurial that he went to the state capitol in Louisiana like 100 different times and started 100 different companies. He was a dentist by trade. He was really into natural, fluoride-free toothpaste. He had his own recipe, and he was trying to do this company. And so he was really creative and really independent. He even had his own radio show on the local AM channel. He was attacking the corruption in Shreveport. The Attorney General was dealing drugs and was framing people, and that's how David met a few of his friends. Now, David also knew a few things about the Oklahoma City bombing, and so when he happened to meet two young medical students introduced to him by a somewhat freakish blonde albino Pakistani named Muhammad Jamal Khan in year 2000, a few red flags went up for David Graham. Muhammad Jamal Khan is this guy that David at first thought he could maybe get to invest in his dental, natural toothpaste company, because he thought Muhammad Jamal Khan was really connected. This guy's very slick. He sort of has this air of being of money. And even though he was a blonde albino Pakistani, he actually looks, when you see the video on Collateral News on the web, he doesn't look completely freakish. And so some people think was this a complete, setup or something. But I think Muhammad Jamal Khan is the kind of person who talks too much. He was obviously the handler for these two young Saudis that he introduced to David Graham, and the protector, because he was having these two young Saudis live with him. And he was taking care of them, he was giving them money, but Muhammad Jamal Khan talked too much. He at one point bragged that his father knew Osama bin Laden, and he said this in front of David Graham. Some of the other Saudi handler people were kind of like glaring at him like, shut the F up. So that was a red flag. Then Muhammad Jamal Khan talks about wanting to buy a big box truck. Then Dr. Graham has introduced these young Saudi medical students, but they don't speak English. So Dr. Graham thinks, how is it that these guys are really here to study medicine and they don't speak English in our country? No, there's something not right here. So Dr. Graham suspected that Muhammad Jamal Khan and his coterie of young Saudis might be plotting a terrorist act against the local Air Force base, Barksdale Air Force Base, home of the B-52 bombers. Dr. Graham's a Vietnam veteran, staunch patriot. He loves the B-52 bombers. He actually says this in his book. He calls them the mighty B-52s. So it's not my perspective, but God love him and God rest his soul. So Graham calls the FBI and says, I really suspect this guy Muhammad Jamal Khan, and he says the thing about he says his father knows bin Laden. Bin Laden has attacked our embassies in Kenya and Sudan. I suspect, this thing about the box truck has got me thinking about Oklahoma City. I really think there's something up here. FBI visits Graham numerous times shortly thereafter. This is November 2000, right? 10 months before 9/11. So FBI does come and visit him. There's lots of eyewitnesses. Secret Service even comes and visits Dr. Graham. Then Dr. Graham gets a phone call. It's Ray Spoon at the Shreveport office of the FBI. We got kind of a strange phone call, Dr. Graham. Some anonymous caller said, we're going to get whoever just ratted out Muhammad Jamal Khan. And so we're talking about the FBI here. They have the capacity to trace phone calls because they're tracing our phone calls. And you would think that they would trace that phone call and find out who that was rather than relay it as a death threat against Dr. Graham. But it seems that it's pretty clear what's going on here. It seems more like Muhammad Jamal Khan is very connected. Some of the videos I brought back from my investigation in Shreveport show Muhammad Jamal Khan, because Dr. Graham was such a great indie reporter, radio investigative journalist, that he clandestinely made videotapes of himself talking to Muhammad Jamal Khan after 9/11, and he corroborates all this. He talks about, remember that time with the young Saudis, and Muhammad Jamal Khan says, yes, those people is gone, September 11th happened. But one thing Dr. Graham says to Muhammad Jamal Khan is, isn't it, how is it that you got married in Texas to stay in the country, but you're also married in Pakistan? Isn't that bigamy? And Muhammad Jamal Khan says, oh, they tried to arrest me for that, but that's no problem. I'm very well connected in Washington. I'm friends with the ambassador, Pakistani ambassador, my ambassador. In broken English, he says this very, very funny thing. They tried to convict me for that one, and he's just laughing and giving high fives to Dr. Graham on camera, and is just like obviously a little bit nervous about the topic of potential bigamy charges, but very, very confidently and giddily brags about his connections in Washington. So, it's no coincidence that the FBI is passing along a death threat. And this is not the very first and only death threat that Dr. Graham was to receive. I went down there and talked to Deacon John Milkovich at the Shreveport Community Church. And this guy's an outstanding attorney. He's a lawyer. He's run for office. He's a deacon at the local church. And he also said that the FBI in Shreveport numerous times went up to Dr. Graham and said, how's your health, Dr. Graham? No, you don't understand. How is your health? So that, again, is indicative of some sort of threatening behavior. You don't do that if you like somebody, So Dr. Graham was a meticulous researcher, and he was documenting everything. He wrote a book called the 9/11 Graham Report. He decided, well, at first he tried to take it to the joint Congressional Senate inquiry. This guy was very by the book. He was so mainstream Christian, he actually had connections inside the Christian Coalition, and they actually helped him get onto Capitol Hill. It turns out the Christian Coalition has certain CIA connections that they can help you get stuff done. It's pretty creepy, but that actually happened, but nothing really came of it. He could never get the time of day from the Joint Congressional Inquiry. Big surprise. But I'll come back to that when we talk about Senator Bob Graham, no relation. When we talk about, so remind me, we're going to come back to that. But so Dr. Graham is on the verge of self-publishing his book. I'm a big fan of that. We do that at VoxPop, actually. We have a whole separate store for self-publishing. I really believe in it because sometimes you can't get it through mainstream media channels, which may or may not be subject to influence by certain entities. So Dr. Graham decides to self-publish it. Now, according to Graham's friend, Vernon Moore, the FBI deliberately said, don't publish that book. Specifically said, don't publish your report. And whether that was because it was going to embarrass the FBI for not stopping 9/11 from happening in advance or something more nefarious, who knows. But according to a source close to Graham, they said that. This is Memorial Day 2004. On May 29th, in between the hours of 11 a.m. and 1 p.m., somewhere on the road, in between Lake Conroe, Texas, north of Houston, and Diboll, Texas, just out there to the east, Dr. Graham was poisoned, we think with ethylene glycol. We think it was somehow put into a bottle of iced tea that he had in his car. He thought he was having a stroke. He goes to the hospital. One of his friends comes in from Louisiana and says, I know you might think I've been watching too much TV, but you should really do some checking on this, check for foul play. They ran a toxicology report. It came back positive for toxins, ethylene glycol. That's when the hospital freaked out and put a security guard on the door, realized that this guy was under attack from somewhere or something. Dr. Graham spent 27 months